Okay, so this discussion is devoted to personality disorders. Now, personality disorders is another group of disorders that is also quite interesting. So, sabi ko nga, di ba, all of the disorders that we are going to be discussing here are interesting based on their own merits. So, lahat yan may kanya-kanyang quirks uh, and such. So to without further ado, this is the outline. So let's have an outline. Let's have an overview of course, what personality disorders are, or and then what are the aspects of a personality disorder. So before we can call it a personality disorder, and then to start first with the disorders, we have the cluster A disorders, which is comprised of the paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal disorders. And then after that, we have the cluster B disorders, which are comprised of the antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic disorders. And then lastly, the cluster C disorders, which is comprised of the avoidant, dependent, and the obsessive compulsive disorders. Okay. So, so these are some of the questions that we'll try to answer in the discussion. First off, what are the essential features of a personality disorder? Next is what are the features of odd or eccentric personality disorder? What are the features of dramatic, emotional, and erratic personality disorders? And then next, what are the features of anxious or fearful personality disorders? So as you can see, we only have four. And then the last three questions, or the following three questions here in the latter part, are the focus questions of each cluster of disorders. Okay, so when we talk about personality disorders, this is its definition. So, ang definition niya is that it is a persistent pattern of emotions, cognitions, and behaviors that results in an enduring emotional distress for the person affected and or for others, which may cause difficulties with work and relationship. So, masasabi nating personality disorder na siya if it's something that is problematic with the person's personality. Kaya nga siya personality disorder kasi it is comprised of one's emotions, one's way of thinking, and their behavioral responses that causes stress for the person themselves or those who are suffering from that PD and doon sa mga nakapaligid sa kanila. Okay. Now, when we say enduring, it is for a long time. We all know how the term or the concept of personality was discussed to you in your TOP, 'di ba? So, pag sinabi nating personality traits, it is an enduring characteristics of a person. So, pangmatagalan siya. Napapalitan ba siya? Yes, pwede siyang mapalitan, pwede siyang magbago after some time. Pero, it's relatively permanent. And with this permanency, it's also an inflexible predisposition. Meaning to say, hindi mo na siya kayang baguhin. Or, itry mo man siyang baguhin, parang magbabago siguro mga first few weeks, then after that, balik ulit sa dati. And because of the problem itself, kaya nga siya disorder, it is maladaptive and causes distress and or impairment. It also has a high comorbidity with other disorders. With this particular disorder, yan, pwedeng meron sila ring mood disorder, meron rin sila anxiety disorder. Kasi nga, this is another condition of disorders. So, mataas ang possibility na may iba pang existing na disorder. And generally, they have poor prognosis. And this is because their condition is egosyntonic. So, na-mention ko na yung term na egosyntonic last time when we discussed anorexia nervosa, 'di ba? Ang sabi ko, between eating disorder of bulimia nervosa and anorexia nervosa, mas mabilis i-treat si bulimia nervosa because of the fact that the condition is ego dystonic. DYS, dystonic. Yung anorexia nervosa naman kasi, syntonic siya. So, katulad din ng mga personality disorders, hindi rin maganda prognosis ng anorexia nervosa. So, balikan natin, ano ba ibig sabihin ng egosyntonic? So, egosyntonic, ayan, they often feel consistent with one's identity. Patients don't feel that treatment is necessary kasi nga it's their personality, so they feel that there's nothing to be fixed kasi ako to parang ganun ang thinking nila. Bakit ba hindi nila ako feel? Walang problema sa akin, sila ang may problema kasi di nila ako feel. So ganun yung thinking ng may mga PD. So under this particular group, there are 10 specific clusters, 10 specific disorders that are organized into 3 clusters. Okay, now before we dive into those clusters or these specific disorders, we have to also understand the kind of disorder or the kind of PD versus the degree of the PD. Okay. And this is because notoriously, personality disorders have been traditionally assigned as all or nothing categories. So, meaning to say, kailangan ma-fulfill mo siya or hindi yan disorder. Kasi nga, again, it's quite difficult to assess this disorder dahil nga, we're talking about the personality. 'Di ba? Parang since that is the personality of a person or an individual, when would you say that it's already maladaptive? When would you say that it's already dysfunctional, 'di ba? So kaya parang ang naging treatment na sa kanya ng mga clinician, it's that you either you have it or you don't. Pero binago nila as we go through other revisions of DSM-5, binago nila yan. So in DSM-5, they retained the categorical diagnosis, but they also introduced an additional dimensional model of the personality disorder. When we say dimensional model, individuals are rated to the degree to which they exhibit various personality disorder. So, aside from the kind, when we say kind, ano bang pinapakita niya? Anxious ba siya? Erratic ba yung personality niya? Weird ba yung personality niya? Dramatic ba yung personality niya? Those are the kind. Those are the category. Pero, kumare, nalaman mo na anxious yung personality niya. To what degree is the anxiousness or the anxiety? So, yun yung isa pang factor na kailangan mong i-assess. Okay. So, cross-cultural research establishes the universal nature of the dimensions. So, ito yung isa sa mga pinagbabasihan nun, or isa sa mga makakatulong in order to really understand the categorical and dimensional models when it comes to understanding personality disorders. So, we all know the ocean model or the big five, wherein nandun yung openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I cannot emphasize how important knowing and understanding this deeply kasi even up until now, I'm using this model to assess my clients, especially those who are seeking nullity of their marriage. Ginagamit namin tong mga assessment tools na may gantong dimensional paradigm in order to assess their personality. Okay, so we have the three clusters based on the DSM-5. Even in the prior DSM, like with DSM-4TR, ganyan na rin siya. However, we have like 11 disorders there. Parang merong passive-aggressive dito sa part na to, sa cluster C. So, sa pero ngayon nabawasan na siya. Um, Ayan. Pero it's still ABC. So, pag sinabi natin cluster A, so automatic, ito yung mga personality disorders na medyo kakaiba. Kakaiba, weird yung pinagagawa, weird yung pinaniniwalaan, weird yung actuations, or kung hindi weird ang word natin, eccentric, beyond the normal. You cannot say that it's weird. We might say that it's unique, uniquely themselves, uniquely their own, 'di ba? And then we also have the cluster B. Ito naman yung very dramatic, very emotional, and very erratic cluster. So, ito yung hindi mo na ine-expect kung anong gagawin nila next, or kunwari na pagsalitaan mo lang ng something, nagiiyak na siya, yung mga ganon. Makikita natin yan in a bit as I explain to you these disorders one by one. And then, cluster C, these are the very anxious group. Yung, hindi siya anxiety disorder per se, pero their personality is like, sino ba yung highly anxious na character? If you would go back the Seven Dwarfs in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, may anxious character doon. And then, si Winnie the Pooh, meron din. I forgot, sino ba to? Sino ba? Si Piglet. Si Piglet ba yung very anxious doon? Kasi pag inisa-isa nyo rin yung mga characters sa Winnie the Pooh, they represent a specific group of disorders. So, it will be very good to go back to it. Okay. Okay. Nasa na ba ako? Okay, so the prevalence of personality disorders, it affects about 10%, 10,000, 10% of the general population, and about the origin and the course of the disorder, ang sabi nila is that it might have begun during the childhood, and it tend to run on a chronic course kung hindi napansin or hindi na-treat agad. However, it's not always na kunwari, napansin mo na medyo violente nung bata. So, baka iniisip mo, ay, antisocial yan paglaki. It can transition to a different personality disorder altogether. So, again, mamaya, in a bit, pag-usapan natin yung mga details ng disorders na to. Okay, so in terms of the statistics, gender distribution and gender bias in diagnosis, there are conditions that are seen more in women and in men than in men, and vice versa. So I think it has something to do with also the societal, how the society imposes the gender roles and such, 'di ba? May kinalaman yun dun eh. So katulad nito, yan, men often show traits like aggression and detachment, while women often show submission and insecurity. And then in terms of the antisocial disorder, males are seen to more diagnosed with this disorder, whereas with histrionic, before histrionic, when I was still studying, histrionic is higher with women than with males. Pero ngayon, parang halos equal na yung ratio niya. So, yeah. Okay, comorbidity is the rule but not the exception. So there are cases when the person can have two or more personality disorder and an additional mood or anxiety disorder. So, pwede yung mangyari. Unlike with other conditions na hindi pwede siyang maging comorbid with this group, pwede siyang maging comorbid with this group provided that etc etc. So and this is again because we're talking about personality, and personality is so diverse na pwedeng not only one group ng personality ang meron siya or na-identify na problematic sa kanya, but another group as well. So, and this is good. This is good improvement. This is a good progression in this disorder. Kasi when I was in college and when I was practicing already, kasi I began my practice 2007. Nakakaalaman na ng edad dito. Hirap na hirap ako with some of my cases for this one. Kasi for annulment cases, since lumabas kasi si DSM-5 2013, so we're still using DSM-4TR. So DSM-4TR, we cannot make the personality disorders comorbid. So minsan, ang nakikita ko, may narcissism siya and then may OCPD siya. So, tinatanong ko sa boss ko nun, paano ko gagawin to? So, sabi niya, lagay mo na lang features. Kasi ang tanong niya kagad, na-meet ba lahat ng criteria dun sa isa? Ano ba yung mas na-meet? Sabi ko, etong isa. So, sabi niya, sige, ilagay mo yan, tas lagay mo na lang may features siya nun. Para hindi nga namin ma-violate yung rules ng DSM. Kasi, we have to be careful in that because that particular report is going to be presented in the court. So, hindi pwedeng mali-mali yung nakalagay doon. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the personality disorders still under study. So the first one is the sadistic personality disorder, wherein the person enjoys inflicting pain. So it's not just pain related to sex. So it's not sexual. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina. Last week with paraphilic disorder, particularly the sexual sadism, na kailangan talaga yung term na sexual, otherwise it's just sadism na hindi naman necessarily laging may sexual behavior na associated. And then this one, the passive aggressive, which is funny kasi nga naloloka ako dito. Kasi nga, inalis nila sa DSM-5. Tapos ngayon, understudy pa rin siya. So, I think it has something to do with the lack of evidences in DSM-4TR. Kaya nila inalis. However, may mga umalma siguro. Kaya, binabalik ulit. So, with these two disorders, ang nakita nila is may possibility pero under ano pa rin siya, investigation. So hindi pa siya full-fledged na disorder. Pinag-aaralan pa lang siya. Parang prolonged grief disorder. So ayan, that is a new disorder in the DSM-5-TR. Before, pinag-aaralan pa lang siya, pero ngayon apart na siya ng disorders. Okay. Related to that, we also have personality disorders. Ano ba to? Personality disorders, which we call other personality disorder, like for example, personality change due to another medical condition. You have to read your DSM-5-TR further to understand it. Kasi may mga iba totally nagbabago nga yung personality nila because of a certain condition, medical condition that they have. We also have the other specified personality disorder. Ito yung mga hindi fully namimit yung criteria ng iba. So like for example, diniagnose mo siya ng narcissistic personality disorder, pero you feel na may pinapakita pa siyang iba pang symptoms ng ibang PD, pero hindi nga nami-meet yung criteria. So pwede mo siyang ilagay as other specified personality disorder. And then ilagay mo anong specification yon. And then we also have the unspecified personality disorder. Ayan, yung hindi mo nagko-cause siya ng distress because of the personality trait nga nung tao na yon. However, hindi talaga pinpointed as ang group siya, and also what particular trait was causing the problem. Okay. So, yan. Going with the clusters, again, cluster A are the odd or eccentric group. So under it are the paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. So be careful with the spelling, and also be careful of interchanging the two. Magkaiba yung dalawang yan. And then cluster B, we have the dramatic or erratic group. And this is comprised of the antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and the narcissistic personality disorders. And then the last one, the cluster C group, are composed of or is composed of the avoidant, dependent, and the obsessive compulsive personality disorders. Okay. Now, what's the features of the cluster A? So, cluster A personality disorders have this pervasive and unjustified mistrust and suspicion. So, hindi naman lahat ng yung tatlong disorder ay may ganito. There are some. Okay? And but what is common with them is that they tend to have few meaningful relationships, since they tend to be sensitive to criticism, and they also have a poor quality of life kasi nga wala silang masyadong pinagkakatiwalaan, and then very suspicious sila of other people, yun nga, and then sensitive din sila sa feedback coming from people, kaya rin parang medyo ina-isolate nila yung sarili nila. So that is for paranoid personality disorder. Sorry. Okay. So ito yung mga ilan na ba yung na-diagnose? Hindi ko masyado ito nagagamit na diagnosis sa annulment cases ko. But there are few whom I have diagnosed with that. So, I remember a case before that the suspicion was so severe to the point na ang dineclare ko na may paranoia or may paranoid PD is the wife, kasi nga ang kwento sa akin nung when I was doing the marital history and the interview and other things, sabi sa akin nung asawa nga, yung lalaki, is that he cannot even call his mother and sister kasi nga pinagsususpetsahan siya ng asawa niya. So, and then anyone na makausap niya na opposite sex, member of the opposite sex, pinagdududahan na siya lagi. Even having appointments, and usually kasi yung mga appointment ay kailangan niya kausapin secretary, and most of the secretaries are female. So yun, sabi ng asawa niya parang, ano yan, babae mo na naman yan, kaluguyo mo na naman. And then I asked the man, has there ever been a history of him cheating on his wife? So sabi niya, never. Wala naman daw nangyaring ganon. Kaya nga siya na-stress na. Yun. Kaya parang ang bilis para lang sa akin i-diagnose na PD yung babae. Kasi nga, it was causing stress doon sa asawa. To the point na umayaw na siya, nag-file na siya ng annulment. Kasi eventually na pikon na siya, kakaduda sa kanya. He decided to just go ahead. Parang kumbaga dahil advance na naman daw yung suspicion sa kanya, edi gawin niya na yung yung I know the rational or rationalization is quite backward, pero remember that the husband was under a very stressful circumstance, kaya yun na lang ang ginawa niya. Parang since pinagdududahan mo naman ang pinagdududahan, might as well do it, 'di ba? Ayun, and then parang nga magkaroon na siya ng a reason to really get out of the marriage. Kasi, ang sabi niya, kahit anong paliwanag niya nga daw, hindi pinapakinggan ng asawa niya. And then, pag trinay niya daw sabihin na, ayan, nagsususpecha ka naman. Nagagalit pa daw sa kanya. And then, ang hindi niya daw matanggap is that alam niyang hindi siya yung mali, pero siya yung nagsusorry. Kasi nga para lang hindi sila magkagalit, kasi nakita niya rin daw kung paano maapektuhan yung mga anak nila. And then this is confirmed by the witnesses. Yung kapitbahay nila, may kapitbahay din silang babae na ayun, pinagsilosan din ng asawa, may asawa din yung babae. And then yung mga anak nila, they all confirmed that kind of personality that the wife has. So, ayun. So, you can just imagine living with that kind of person to the point that you decided to, sige, I'll go ahead and just do what you are accusing me of. Total, ang dami-dami mong pag-aakusa sa akin, hindi ko naman ginagawa, di sige, gawin ko na lang, 'di ba? To the point na ginawa niya na. I know it sounds funny, but believe me, it's quite stressful hearing this types of stories day in, day out. And then, hindi ko pa kasal. Ang sakit sa ulo. Okay. So, the cause of paranoid personality disorder, it's one of the disorders that is not quite understood what causes it. However, ang nakita nila is that there might be some upbringing or cognitive beliefs na nung bata pa sila, na pinaniwala sila na ayan, the world is a dangerous place, and people are deceptive, kaya wala ka dapat papaniwalaan. The cultural factors can also be a cause for this disorder, more often found in people with experiences that lead the mistrust of other. So, like for example, if the person has been in prison before, or the person was a refugee, people with hearing impairments can also be a cause uh, for developing this kind of disorder, as well as older adults. Um, with the woman, if I'm not mistaken correctly, if I'm not mistaken, one of I think inexplain ko siya in a way na has something to do with the fact that she was raised only by her mom, so she didn't know her father. And then kasi parang nakwento nung anak nila na ganun daw yung sinasabi lagi sa kanya ng lola niya, na parang yung lahat ng lalaki manloloko, kasi the the child of the couple that I interviewed is male. So kaya nga yung bata nagtatampo, sabi niya parang alam mo yun, lola mo sasabihin sa lahat ng lalaki manloloko. Lalaki yung apo niya, 'di ba? So I think it has something to do with that, na siguro naloko yung nanay nung wife, and then this lead to mistrust of the male uh, members of the male sex, and eventually ayun, ganun niya na din pinalaki yung anak niya, to the point that it affected her daughter's family life. Okay, so treatment options. Actually, the sad thing about this one is that um, since they are very suspicious, they don't really seek help, even with the professional. Kasi nga, they don't think that the professional is going to help them. Okay. panoorin niyo yung ano, I Am Sam, ang bida si Sean Penn. One of his friends there have shown up paranoid personality disorder. Aside from the fact that they have disability, intellectual disability, his group of friends together with him has this intellectual disability. Lahat sila yata may ano, some kind of mental retardation. So, tagal ko na rin kasing napanood yun. Pero isa sa mga barkada niya doon, may paranoid personality disorder. And if they do look for help on their own accord, the treatment would focus on the development of trust, which is quite challenging kasi trust, as according to Eric Erickson, it is something that was built in the early stages of the life development. To counter the negativistic thinking, cognitive therapy will definitely work. However, unfortunately, dahil nga konti lang yung mga nagsisik out ng help for this case, there is very few good outcome studies for this particular case. Okay. Now, moving on to the schizoid. Okay? So, this is in acronym, pag i-acronym namin, kasi yung kanina PPD, ito ay SCHZ or Z. PD. Kasi yung mamaya, T. Schizotypal naman kasi yon. Okay, so for a schizoid personality disorder, ayan, this is a pervasive detachment from social relationship, and they show very limited range of emotion in interpersonal situation. There is actually a significant overlap with the autism spectrum disorder. So, kaya nagkakaroon din ng problema dito kasi minsan napagdududahan na baka autism yung condition nila when it is a schizoid personality because of the similarity in the symptoms. Okay. Ito yung mga ano, yan, hindi sila, they don't seek out friends and even relationship, like intimate relationship, even though they are at the age that they should be seeking intimate relationship and of course friendship, even as basic as friendship. And then they show limited emotions, 'di ba? Like for example, when we are with friends tapos nagbabatuhan ng joke, 'di ba? Nagtatawanan tayo noon. Ano bang magandang 'di ba nakita nyo, if you have seen The Good Doctor, pero kasi nasa autism spectrum doon yung ano, yung main lead. So I watched the Korean version, 'di ba? Kumare, nagjo-joke na sila pero hindi pa rin niya nagigets yung joke kasi that is one of the features of autism spectrum. So ito, wala naman siya talagang autism or hindi mo siya makikita na nasa autism spectrum siya. Pero kung nagbabatuhan kayo ng joke, tapos hindi siya masyado na nagre-react. O kaya sabihin niya parang, oh, nasaktan nga ako dun eh. Pero 'di ba, when we say nasaktan ako or masaya ako, 'di ba? Sometimes our facial expression would follow with what we are saying. Pero with these people, it's not the case. Sabi niya, oh, nasaktan nga ako dun. But they would say it in a matter of fact manner. Hindi mo makikita na nasaktan nga sila doon, contrary to what they are saying. Now, the cause of this one is unclear. However, what they have found out is that common to people who would be diagnosed with this is that they have this childhood shyness. The patient or the client was extremely shy when they were younger. And then they would also prefer social isolation that sometimes resembles autism. Kaya may iba na may misdiagnose as autistic or someone with autism spectrum disorder, even though it's just personality disorder. So kaya nga we have to be very careful in diagnosing this, kasi nga we're talking about the personality and not something that is genetically predisposed or caused by uh, mainly caused by biological factors katulad nga ng autism. Okay. Um, so, etiology is very unclear kasi nga it's one of the disorders that is not really well researched. However, yun, nakita nila is that similar across cases, very shy as a child yung mga patients na to. Or at times, ayun, mayroon din silang nakikita na history ng abuse or neglect in childhood. So meaning to say that the parenting style is indifferent or neglectful parenting style. So yun, yung hindi pinapansin ng magulang. So definitely it's going to there's a big chance that it's going to cause this kind of disorder to happen, kasi we all know or na-discuss in your TOP and also in your developmental psychology how important uh, parental interaction, not only the mother interaction, mother-child interaction, but also the father-child interaction is in the early stages of development of a person. Okay. Okay. Now, just like with paranoid personality disorder, people with this disorder, uh, they seldom seek help on their own. They have to be prompted, or they have to be referred by another person for them to be treated. Kasi nga, again, these types of disorder are ego syntonic. They don't see any problem with how they are functioning. They are good with how they are functioning for as long as you don't bother them. Bahala ka sa buhay mo, parang ganon, 'di ba? So, um, but the treatment that they are going to have focuses more on the value of interpersonal relationships. So, meron ditong mga parang assertiveness training, and at the same time, ayun, parang reforming or reformatting how to interact with other people. And they are taught how to build empathy and social skills. I think Sheldon has this one. Pero ang dami ko nababasa na forum na uh, he might have autism kasi nga how he focuses. Pero pag titingnan mong mabuti kasi, 'di ba? Balikan natin yung symptoms. Ayan, yung mga unang first few episodes of uh, Big Bang Theory, 'di ba? If you are a fan of that, he is very detached in terms of social relationship. And then he has this very limited range of emotion in interpersonal situations. 'Di ba? Minsan nagjo-joke si Leonard or um, si Penny, pero hindi niya nagigets, or minsan sarcastic na yung remarks sa kanya, pero siniseryoso niya pa rin, or he would answer in a matter-of-fact manner. So, we can say that he might have schizoid personality disorder. No, if that's if we are correct on this assumption. Okay. Um, Yan. So basically, all throughout the Big Bang Theory, we have seen how he developed from someone who doesn't have a care for other people, and who likes his own company, and who's very limited in his social skills, to someone who can uh, empathize at some level and show some social skills. Kasi 'di ba, parang later on or in the in the latter series or season, we can see him cracking his own jokes, 'di ba? So, minsan kahit na medyo robotic yung tawa niya, he was already laughing, unlike as compared doon sa previous or do sa first few episode or the pilot episode. But again, since this particular cluster doesn't really seek help, it they also lack good outcome studies. Okay, so next is the schizotypal personality disorder. So, what is the clinical feature of this disorder? So, people with this disorder, um, they behave and dress oddly or very unusual way, which is not really common for how the people in the society dresses. So, um, I cannot give a known personality for this one. Sige, let me think in a bit. And then they tend to be highly socially isolated and highly suspicious. They also have this magical thinking and ideas of reference and illusion. So when we say ideas of reference, they have this belief that they have that things have special significance to them. Let's say, for example, sasabihin niya, um, ay, nakita ko yung number 4 sa sa labas. Ang dami ko nakikitang number 4 sa labas. May ibig sabihin yon or it's a message for me, ganyan. Parang, kahit na number 4 lang naman siya. Like, for example, 4 yung pangalan ng brand na nasa billboard, 4 yung number ng mga bahay dun sa street. Pero sa kanya, the person is thinking na it's a sign for her or him. And then a lot of people who would have this disorder would also meet the criteria for major depression. And sometimes since they have this one, sometimes they have or they can be seen to have a milder form of schizophrenia. Kasi yung iba, medyo iba na yung yung sinasabi. So, by the way, for the illusions, these are the unusual perceptual experiences but not as severe as hallucinations or delusions. So, like for example, sabi niya, parang may nasa kwarto ko kahit again, let's take out the context of the supernatural for a moment and just focus on the personality disorder. Sabi niya, parang may kasama ako dito sa bahay kahit na mag-isa lang siya. However, it does not fit the criteria for hallucination or delusion. It's the person's illusion per se. And then magical thinking, yun. Kaya nga medyo the schizotypal medyo malapit na siya for schizophrenia or the psychotic disorders. Kasi the dressing and the behavior is quite unusual. Ayan, may social isolation din na nangyayari, and this one which we can attribute as parang siguro beginnings of hallucinations and delusions but doesn't really fit the criteria of hallucinations and delusion. Sino bang magandang example for this one? May mga ganito tayo dati na eh. I think Madam Auring. Yeah, I don't know if naabutan niyo siya, but Madam Auring is quite a very flamboyant character. Iba siya manamit. Talagang eye-catching and even for a normal day, kung lalabas siya, iba yung suotan niya. And then, ayun nga, parang I'm not sure if it's because dahil manghuhula nga siya. Kaya siya nagkakaroon ng ganito. Tama ba? Si Madam Auring nga pa yun. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so the causes for this one, some studies have suspected that there might be some genes that has something to do with schizophrenia, um, pero hindi siya full-blown, or it might be a recessive schizophrenia gene, kaya parang mild lang yung expression niya. There are also some who are saying that it developed after childhood maltreatment or trauma, especially for some men. Um, on the other hand, there are some studies that shows na merong brain deficits yung mga taong may schizotypal personality disorder. Like for example, they have problems with learning and memory that might be causing the disorder to happen. Okay, so for treatment for this one, since it is highly comorbid with depression, isa sa mga ina-address nila is the depression itself. Dahil nga mataas ang risk factor ng pagde-develop ng major depressive disorder with this particular PD and compared with other PD. And then, for the treatment, the main focus is combination of the antipsychotic medication in order to lower those magical thinking, illusions, and ideas of reference. And then, of course, the cognitive behavior therapy to change some of their unusual behavior that's causing problematic reactions and later on causing distress on the person. And social skills training. Okay, now moving on with antisocial personality disorder. So take note how it is spelled. It is not hyphenated, unlike yung antisocial na pagkakaalam nyo. And to correct the term for this one, when we kasi ang gamit na antisocial is the hyphenated one, and then you people, not you, okay, people would use it to refer to someone who doesn't like socializing. That's not the right term for that. The term for that is asocial. A person who does not like to socialize is called a social person or an asocial individual, and not antisocial. Okay? So, antisocial, it is more of a PD. May iba pa siyang ibig sabihin. That's why we have to use the correct form or correct term para hindi tayo magkamali ng implication or magkamali ng pagbigay ng adjective sa isang tao. Okay, when we talk about antisocial personality disorder, one of the main features of this one is the failure to comply with social norms, violation of the rights of others, impulsive, irresponsible, and deceitful acts, lacks of conscience, empathy, and remorse. Okay. Sociopathy and psychopathy are typically referred to this disorder because they tend to have very similar traits. However, some are saying that sociopathy and psychopathy are quite different to antisocial. So, may mga ganong literature. So, if you are curious about that, try to read it up kasi I don't like to, kasi mas ano pa siya eh, mas ato kasi talagang totally not considering the norms of the whole society. Ito, it has more on more problems on the psychological development per se that causes the person to do heinous acts. And then people who are said to be antisocial, they tend, or some of them are charming, and some of them are interpersonally manipulative. So this is one of the most common disorder that I would that I would diagnose with my annulment cases before. And this is because namimit nila yung criteria. And a lot of the people whom I diagnose with this are males. So, yun. Failure to comply with social norms. Of course, in our society, once you are married, you are expected to stay faithful with your wife, 'di ba? And then, ano pa yan, yung pag bibigay mo ng sustento is also one of the expected norms when you get a family or when you get married. So, yung mga ganon, yun yung mga dinidiscuss ko doon. Bakit sila nagkaroon ng ganon or bakit mo nasabing may disorder siya na ganito. And then, minsan violation of the rights of others kasi may mga iba kong cases na kaya lang sila nagpakasal kasi ni-rape niya yung yung napang-asawa niya. Or intentionally binuntis niya yung asawa niya, kaya sila napilitang magpakasal kahit ayaw naman mabuntis nung isa. Yeah, may mga ganong storya. Intentionally siya yung nagbutas ng condom or sinabi niya na para may iniinom siyang gamot tas hindi mabubuntis or baog siya. So may lie. Yan. Deceitfulness. O kaya minsan mangungutang tapos di binabayaran or yung sasabihin, hindi pangako ko ganto 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 ganto. So that is irresponsibility. And then lack of conscience, ayan, paulit-ulit na ganun yung cycle nila, especially for those with history of domestic abuse. Ayun, parang ang nakalagay sa history, 20 years silang mag-asawa, pero sa 20 years na yun, 15 years yung binubugbog yung asawa niya. Natigil lang yung pangbubugbog sa asawa niya after the wife left him finally. And they had been separated for the past 5 years. So may mga ganon. So, lack of conscience yun. Minsan, makikita din yun sa, ayun, hindi sila nakipag-communicate sa mga anak nila even though the kids are still young, and then intentionally they will withheld financial support, even emotional support to the kids. So that is irresponsibility, also lack of conscience and empathy as well as remorse, kasi may mga iba doon na yung children mismo yung humahanap sa kanila pero wala pa rin silang ginagawa. So there are those cases, and believe me, these are not fun cases. I didn't enjoy doing those cases. And then yan, but true, they can be charming and interpersonally manipulative. I had a client once like that, kasi to make our case or our report stronger, we would interview the other party as well. So dumating sa interview namin yung asawa, yung lalaki. And he was quite a pleasant guy. So, kaya nga ako nagulat kasi iba yung kinukwento nung asawa doon sa paano pinortray or iba yung kinuwento sa akin nung wife doon sa perception ko sa kanya. Kasi, talagang ito na yung mga sinasabi niyong gaslighting, di ba? Yung mga nausong term. Even before it happened, ginagawa na yan ng mga antisocial. Even before it became a buzzword, ginagawa na yan ng mga antisocial. We just didn't have a proper term for that. He was so charming to the point that I was actually convinced na ang mali naman yung babae. So, ganun sila ka-manipulative. And I think I have to factor in the fact na I was still young at that time. So, in terms of my clinical experience, hindi pa ako ganun ka-experience in dealing with such kind of people or people with this type of PD. Kasi talagang paikutin ka nila para maniwala ka sa kanila. Ayun, parang, ano pang nangyari? Sa kinakwento niya, parang, ayun, na, parang pumapanig na ako sa kanya na, oo, mali nga yung asawa mo, kasalanan yung asawa mo. Parang ganon. And then, I only snap out of it after I realized na, teka lang, parang nagiging bias na ako. I should be a third person or a third party, looking at this in a third party perspective. Not third party na ano ha, kalaguyo or whatnot, but an outsider. I have to look at it in an outsider's perspective. Ano pa ba? Okay. Okay, so criminality in antisocial psychopaths. So, for non-psychopaths na antisocial, so makikita natin there is a big gap. Pero doon sa mga sinasabi nilang psychopaths talaga, and then diagnosed with antisocial PD, sobrang taas ng ano nila, ng percent in terms of the criminal behavior or actions. So, yun na talaga yung psychopaths or sociopaths. Kasi they make it into their career. However, pagdating dito, noticeably, mas mababa ang age, mas mababa ang occurrence in this particular age bracket. So, I'm not sure why, unless I can get my hand on this particular data, makikita natin bakit biglang bumaba dito. Kasi dito sobrang taas eh. Pero kung titingnan naman natin yung non-psychopaths, hindi gaano masyado nagkakalayo yung differences nila per age group. Pwera na lang dito sa 16 to 20. But the rest of the age groups, parang halos magkakalapit lang siya. Okay. Now, for antisocial personality disorder, actually they have or they are seen to have often shown history of behavioral problems even as a child. So, a lot of them are seen to, at some point in time, maybe diagnosed with conduct disorder. Ayan. Wherein, ito yung school grade age na disorder na yun, parang nagkakating, tapos ibang level yung bullying, tapos nagsisira din ng mga gamit sa school. Yun yung mga makikita mo most of the time with this particular children who would be diagnosed with this disorder. Nakikita din nila, ayan, hindi rin consistent yung parental discipline and support for people who would be diagnosed with this disorder. And I can attest to that. With the cases that I have diagnosed with this PD, one of their similarities is the parental discipline or the lack of parental discipline. Either sobrang higpit sa kanila or as in wala talaga, hinahayaan lang sila. So very spoiled sila to the point that they don't understand what responsibility is and how they should be responsible towards other people. And then yung support kasi na sasabihin kasi minsan pag tinignan mo, iba yung meaning ng support ng family nila, unlike doon sa dapat na support na pinapakita or support that would encourage better behavior. So like for example with some of my cases, the support that that are shown by their parents is leniency. They tolerate the behavior. So a lot of the cases that I have done, they have a history of truancy sa school. nagka-cutting class na hindi uma-attend ng classes, absent, tapos yung iba hindi nakagraduate kasi nga nagka-cutting class or ang daming failing grade. And the parents, instead of calling them out on those behavior, ayun, may isa kong case, sabi nung asawa, binayaran lang nung parents niya yung teacher para pumasa. So may mga ganun, very sad, pero yun yung mga nangyayari. I'm not sure kung hanggang ngayon nangyayari pa rin siya, but hopefully hindi na. But before, yun yung isa sa mga talamak na ginagawa para makapasa. And then, even when they are already at the working age or stage, the parents are the one who's still tolerating their behavior. So basically, they're not learning on how to deal and understand what responsibility is. So, yeah. Inconsistent parental discipline. It may be too lax or too strict. Sometimes there are, pero sa mga cases ko parang bihira siya. Ang nakita ko lang, if I remember some of my cases correctly, yung criminal behavior na sinasabi na is the mom and the dad are both drug users. Yun lang. Yun lang yung nakita kong criminal history. Kasi, of course, here in the Philippines, di mo naman sasabihin, mamamatay tao yung tatay niyan or yung nanay niyan, nasa sindikato, diba? We don't say that out in open unless we want to be in trouble. However, the problem is that, recent research suggests that psychopathy is a less reliable predictor of criminality. So, it doesn't mean that because you have the traits of a psychopath, it means that you're going to be a criminal at some point. There are a lot of personalities who are said to fit the traits of a psychopath but are not criminal. So, kayo na mag-isip kung sino yung mga naiisip nyong personality for that. Okay, so unlike with the cluster A disorder na very mystical kasi nga hindi natin alam saan ba siya nanggagaling, ano bang nangyayari sa kanya. According to neurobiological theories, there is an under-arousal hypothesis. The cortical arousal is too low for people with antisocial personality disorder, and this is what makes them irresponsible, highly impulsive, so on and so forth. So parang hindi sila masyado na stress even though what they're doing is against the social norms. So wala silang ganung stress level. Hindi katulad nung nasa cluster C na sobrang stress naman siya, 'di ba? Kasi sobrang high naman siguro ng cortical arousal niya to the point na nagpapanik na siya. There is also this hypothesis that the cerebral cortex per se is not fully developed, and we know that the cerebral cortex is where a lot of our decision making skills are happening, and sa kanila, and even the yun nga yung mature decisions and actions dun mo makikita, pero sa kanila dahil nga hindi daw yun fully developed, they go with what they want to do without really taking into consideration the consequences of their action. And then this is also another hypothesis, fearlessness hypothesis, wherein the person failed to respond to danger cues, like for example, if I have unprotected sex with this person, will it lead to unwanted pregnancy? And then what happens if yung parang wala silang ganong forethought or foresight. Ayan. And then a good example for that, applying it applying that example to another hypothesis or theory is the Grace model. So inhibition signals are outweighed by reward signals. So since they are too focused on the sexual gratification that they will get in having that sex, that unprotected sex, they would do that even though there are a lot of possibilities na mangyayari na hindi naman silang ready na i-face. Okay, so another contributor for this one, genetic influence. Yan. As I mentioned earlier, some of the cases that I have deemed to have antisocial PD is the parents have a history of antisocial behavior. To be specific, the use of illegal substance and doing illegal activities related to using illegal substance, like for example ayun mang-estapa or magnanakaw in order to supplement their vice. Okay. And then developmental influences. High conflict childhood increases the likelihood of APD in at-risk children. So like for example, growing up in an abusive environment, and seeing your parents abuse each other, or always fighting, can also increase the probability of having this disorder. Another factor is this one, impaired fear conditioning. Children who develop APD may not adequately learn to fear aversive consequences of negative action. So like for example, ato, kaya nga it's very essential to, for me, I'm okay with punishment with children kasi because of this, pag hindi talaga sila na discipline ng tama, hindi ko sinabing discipline lang na kahit anong discipline, yung tamang discipline, or helping them understand the consequence of what they have done, can be a factor that may lead to this type of disorder. Like for example, may mga cases kasi na ayun, sinaksak na ng lapis yung kaklase, pero sasabihin na, pagpasensyahan nyo na po yung anak ko, ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. Nag-sorry lang sa teacher, pero the kid was not asked to say sorry to the teacher and also to the person na sinaksak niya ng lapis. So, that is hindi kasi siya parang pinaliwanagan na if you do this, ito, pwede magalit sa'yo yung teacher, pwede magalit sa'yo yung nanay at tatay nung kaklase mo, and you might not be allowed to go to school anymore. So, ayun, hindi kasi sa kanya pinapaliwanag yung consequences ng action na yun. So, kaya akala nung bata is that he or she can do anything without suffering the consequences. So basically that or development of this disorder can happen if that is the case. Okay. Then next is the arousal theory, wherein people with APD are chronically under aroused and seek stimulation from types of activities that would be too fearful or aversive for most. Like for example, yun nga, lying, cheating, 'di ba? Kumbaga, thrill seeker sila na to the point na hindi na yon gagawin ng mga ibang tao kasi nga it's too risky or too it's a high risk situation. Like for example, yung mga nakikita natin ginagawa sa ano ba yung game na yon na nakakaloka, yung pwede mong sagasaan kung sino man gusto mong sagasaan. I forgot that game. I used to play that. just for laughs. Kasi, and then pag hinabol ka ng police, pwede mong i-ditch yung sasakyan. As may one time nga na pinasabog namin yung sasakyan doon. I forgot. Grand Theft Auto yata, if I'm not mistaken. Ayun, but yung mga ganon, basically the character in that game is seeking stimulation. So, under-aroused siya. That's why he's able to do these things. And the psychological and social influences. So, in research studies, psychopaths are less likely to give up when the goal becomes unattainable. And this may explain why they persist with a behavior, even though the behavior is already criminal, that is punished. Okay, so that is for the psychological and social influence. Kasi nga, again, they are built differently. So, for normal people, when the goal is parang impossible na, especially after several tries, for normal people, it would be practical for them to give up. So, they would give up, diba? But for people with antisocial personality disorder, just like with my recent case, ang ginawa niya dahil ayaw ayaw nung girlfriend niya or ayaw nung client na makipag-sex sa kanya without being married first. Pinakasalan niya. And then after they were married, he decided to ayun, mangbabae na. Kasi, ayun, nakuha niya na yung gusto niya. So, 'di ba? Parang very 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 wrong in all level. uh, so kaya nag-file ng annulment yung asawa kasi nga after that magulo na sila, lagi na silang nag-aaway, and then blatantly nang bababae yung asawa niya. Okay. From these studies, we can say that the antisocial personality disorder is the result of multiple interacting factors. So, there is a mutual biological environmental influences wherein early antisocial behavior alienates peers who would otherwise serve as a corrective role model. So, like for example nga, di ba yung kanina sabi ko na if as a child you were not punished correctly for stabbing your classmate with a pencil, that action would of course alienate you from your classmates kasi sasabihin ng kaklase mo, ay si ganto, layuan na natin, nananaksak yan ng lapis. So although it is a normal reaction, the problem is that hindi nako-correct yung behavior na yon. Although the punishment or the corrective the corrective action should come from the parents. Meron din kasing factor dito yung peer nung isang individual. And then, ayan, antisocial behavior and family stress mutually increase one another. So, this is positively correlated to each other. So, isa rin yun sa mga nakita ko sa mga clients na na-diagnose ko with antisocial personality disorder. Isa sa mga family stress nila, kung hindi yung may addiction sa family, parang poor yung family, to the point na, ayun, sabihin sa kanya, wag ka nang mag-aral kasi mahirap tayo. And then, ayun, tatambay na lang siya and magbibisyo. And yung iba, ayun nga, nagde-develop ng antisocial behavior na kasi the situation at home is very stressful. Okay. So, again, since this is speedy, hindi rin yan nagsisik masyado ng help. And antisocial behavior is predictive of a poor prognosis, given that they are very manipulative, so they don't think that they are in the wrong. However, if they do seek help, the emphasis of the treatment is on prevention and rehabilitation. Kasi nga maraming kailangan baguhin sa kanila, or maraming kailangan ayusin sa kanila so that they would be corrected. Kahit na late na yung correction, they will still be corrected on the behaviors that they have shown. Often, incarceration is the only viable alternative. So, yun. For them to be rehabilitated, they have to be imprisoned. Especially for those who have done a very, uh, yun, yung criminal, ano na talaga, criminal type ng action na or behavior na talaga. And then, ayan, the therapist or the helper may need to focus on practical or selfish consequences, ayan, in order to emphasize the point. Kasi nga, again, they need to be rehabilitated doon sa mga beliefs nila or yung mga perspective nila na hindi na correct when they were younger. So, katulad nito, if you assault someone, you'll go to prison. If you got someone pregnant and you didn't give child support, you'll go to the prison. So, yun. Mga, as simple as that. Okay. So, next in cluster B is the borderline personality disorder. So, with the borderline personality disorder, they have unstable moods and relationship. So, a lot of people tend to make this synonymous with bipolar, ibang bipolar sa borderline. Ang instability ng moods nila ay hindi katulad ng bipolar na nagsuswing sa depression to mania. Sa kanila, unstable talaga yung mood nila per se. And then, not only the moods, but also the relationship. Kasi, yung instability ng relationship nila na at one point, they look at their partner as the very ideal partner. And then, at some point, when the partner had done them wrong or they felt that they were done wrong, they would look at the partner as someone who's, parang sugo ni Santanas sa sobrang kasamaan. So, ganun kabilis ang pag-switch nila. And often they are impulsive and also show fears of abandonment, and people with this diagnosis have very poor self-image. Sometimes they also involve themselves with self-mutilation and suicidal gestures. So meaning to say they tend to um for me personally, it's emotional manipulation. So I had a client like that before. Hindi siya yung may borderline. Yung partner niya yung may borderline. Kasi, my client suffered from PTSD because of that. Kasi her partner basically kidnapped her. Pero, parang ginaslight siya. Or, pinaniwala siya na it's not kidnapping per se. It's just because parang the partner loves her so much na ayaw niyang mawala siya, and then the person parang yun, she was fed lies na I'm only sane, or you are the only one that's keeping me sane. It sounds romantic, pero from the abnormal psychology perspective, no, that's already pathological. And then, at some point in time, when my client was already decided na she had enough, kasi tinago nung partner niya yung mga ID niya, yung wallet niya basically, and even her cell phone tinago ng partner niya para wala siyang access sa labas. And then unfortunately my client bagong salta lang siya dito sa Manila. So she thought kasi nga very manipulative yung naging partner niya. She thought that she would not be able to move around Manila unless she has this ID. Sabi ko, no, that's not true. You can just go to women's desk and ask for help kahit wala kang ID. Kasi hindi mo pwedeng kasi you are a person who needs help. Sabi niya, hindi kasi yun yung sinabi sa akin nung yung partner niya nga daw dati na hindi ka makakagalaw dito sa Manila kung wala kang ID, huhulihin ka kung wala kang ID, etc. etc. Sabi ko, no, that's not the case kasi our IDs are not even national ID. So bakit ka huhulihin porket wala kang ID or basic ID to identify yourself? Sabi ko, if you know the number of your parents or someone whom you should have as emergency contact person, walang problema ton. Sabi niya, ayun, hindi na lang siya nagsalita actually. Kasi nga, parang, uh, she was contemplating how she was deceived or how well she was deceived. So, sabi ko na nga lang sa kanya, don't feel too bad about it. Sabi ko, remember, you are or you were in love with this person. So you thought that everything that they were saying were true. So it's alright that you felt that way at that time, but at this moment I'm explaining that it's not true. So yan. And then whenever they would fight, sasabihin niya nga dun sa partner niya na aalis ako, tapos sasabihin sa kaya, sige ka, papakamatay ako. So yan, suicidal gestures. And then sabi ko, did your partner ever try to really commit suicide? Sabi niya, hindi naman, pero kasi nagsa-self-harm siya. So, makikita niya daw may cuts sa Sabi ko, gaano kababaw? Was it too deep? Na talagang natatamaan na yung mga, major veins and arteries? Sabi niya, hindi, parang hindi naman, pero, syempre nagpapanik siya seeing the blood on her partner's arm. Um, so, comorbidity rates are high with other mental disorders. Ayan. Particularly mood disorder. So, it's not synonymous to bipolar disorder per se, but mataas ang comorbidity niya with mood disorder because of this particular feature. Okay. About 80% of borderline patients also have major depression and only 10% are bipolar. So, yan. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina. Hindi yan synonymous na dalawa. Kasi nga, even the statistics shows that there's only 10% of people, there's only 10% comorbidity for those diagnosed with borderline. Okay, and then suicide attempts, about 10% have attempted suicide, but was not completed. And then about 67% are diagnosed with at least one substance use disorder. So, meron na sila sa kanilang nag-use ng drugs, or kung hindi drugs, may parang alcoholic na yung labas. And then eating disorders, about 25% of bulimia patients have borderline personality disorder, and 20% have anorexia. So I'm not sure with the statistics here in the Philippines kasi the patients that I have diagnosed with borderline have not really shown this, although they have exhibited features of some mood disorder, and then there are some who have history of using drugs as well as alcohol for coping. Now, for causes of this disorder, there is a strong genetic component that is said to cause this. And that genetic component is also linked to depression. Kaya nga, mataas ang comorbidity ng depression sa disorder na to. The high emotional reactivity might be inherited, kung nakukuha nila, pwedeng nakuha nila sa nanay nila, sa tatay nila. And brain studies have also shown that people with this disorder have impaired functioning of the limbic system. Um, if the person had been through trauma or abuse uh, in a during childhood, it might increase the risk factor, but hindi naman siya kumbaga almost immediately leading to that. So pwedeng magkaroon lang dahil may ganong history, pero um, hindi naman siya ano ba to? Hindi siya requirement na kailangan meron muna siyang early trauma or abuse para masabi mong may BPD siya. Okay. Now, many patients with BPD have high levels of shame and low self-esteem. So, this is quite true. Um, they really have a problem with their self-esteem. And then, triple vulnerability model of anxiety applies to the borderline personality as well. So, results form the combination of generalized biological vulnerability, their inherited reactivity, psychological vulnerability, they lash out when threatened. Katulad nga ng partner nung client ko, when she mentioned that she would be leaving, ayun, nag-lash out na, sinaktan niya na yung client ko. And then, specific psychological vulnerability, stressors that elicit borderline behavior. So, just like the former partner of my client, ayun, every time that there is a stressor, um, ayun, lumalabas na yung borderline behavior niya or responses niya. Meron pa nga siyang I had to work with that client for a very short period of time, but it's good thing that she was very open to the treatment. Kasi pinababa din nung partner niya yung self-esteem niya. Kasi nga every time that they would fight, ang laging sinasabi sa kanya nung partner niya is uh, basically gaslighting her. Kasi parang hindi naman ako magiging ganto kung hindi mo yun ginawa. Parang ganon. So, parang ultimately kasalanan niya na nangyari yon kasi nga ganto. So, which is very sad for her. Kaya, bumaba rin yung self-esteem ng client ko nun. Kasi nga, basically, the partner caused her to be like that in order to make her stay longer. In order to guilt trip her to staying longer. Which is not a relationship in the real sense of the word. Okay, for the treatment, so there are treatment options and there are some studies that show good outcomes. So antidepressant medication are seen to provide some short-term relief, especially if the mood disorder is comorbid. And then so far, no, 'di ba? Parang first time natin makahear ng ibang therapy aside from CBT. Dialectical behavior therapy is actually one of the most promising treatment for this type of disorder, wherein they focus on dual reality of acceptance of difficulties and need for change. So, yun yung ng DBT. Aside from that, they also focus on interpersonal effectiveness and focus on distress tolerance to decrease the reckless self-harming behavior. Kasi nga, with borderline, whenever they feel threatened, they lash out as a way for as means of coping. However, hindi nga siya effective. Okay. Now, moving on to the histrionic personality disorder. So, for this particular disorder, people with this PD are seen to be overly dramatic and sensational. Meaning to say, parang ano, yeah, they're a bit exaggerated on their behavior and responses. Like, for example, may nag-joke, tas 'di ba tatawa, 'di ba? Tatawa kayo. Hindi naman gano'n ka funny yung joke, pero siya tawang-tawa siya to the point na parang gumugulong na siya sa sahig kakatawa. And then parang akala mo ano, nanonood ka ng artista na nagpe-perform whenever these personalities are in the scene. Then some of them may be sexually provocative, like for example, when we touch other people, we make sure that we respect their personal boundaries. But there are people na pag wari, kukuhitin niya lang or hahampasin niya lang, parang naglilinger yung touch na parang sexualized na in your perspective. I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying. Kaya mas maganda to i-discuss in person eh. Ano ba? Ano bang magandang example nito? Dahil kasi di na ako masyado nanonood ng TV at saka TV shows. Wala na mabigay na magandang example. A good way to put it is yun, medyo malandi ang tatawag, yung parang sasabihin mo, ay, ang landi niya. Yung mga ganon. Kasi nga kakaiba yung galawan niya. Na even asking people a normal question, it's done in a very flirtatious manner. And then, another feature of this disorder is that they are often impulsive and they need to be the center of attention. So this is why everything that they do are attention catching. Like for example, mag-uusap lang sila pero kailangan ang lakas-lakas ng boses nila. And then they talk with a certain flair or a certain tone that would really get them the attention that they want. Even yung tawa nila actually sometimes they make it intentionally like that, or others might not be aware that their laugh is attention catching because of um, how theatrical it sounds. The thinking and emotions are perceived as shallow kasi nga parang yun, kung may sinabi lang, you're so funny, parang ganun kagad siya. Alam mo yun, parang konting kibot, kailangan masishift yung attention sa kanya. And this type of personality are often diagnosed with females. However, there are males that are also diagnosed with this. Just like kanina, actually. Although they were the people that I encountered at in a fast food chain when I went out, they were they are gay. They identified as gay. But we know that gay have a certain flourish to their behavior. But these two gay, I'm not sure if they are a couple or they are friends. But they were quite loud to the point that alam mo yun, nadi-disrupt na yung pagkain mo. Kasi, syempre, we were taught to be respectful, especially when we are in a public place such as these places, 'di ba? Pero kanina sobrang lakas nilang magsalita. And then they were also messing around with the aircon, the air conditioning unit of the chain, the branch, which is something that you're not supposed to touch. And then they went to the branch of the fast food chain only wearing boxer shorts na very skimpy and very thin. Maulan pa kaninang lumabas ako. So, parang sa akin, bakit sila lalabas ng maulan tapos naka-boxer shorts? And alam mong boxer shorts yon. Um, Yeah, and they were even asking one of the crew kung pwede yung ano. Kasi 'di ba when we ask for requests like, kuya, pwede po bang pahingi ng ano ng extra gravy or ano or pwede pong pahingi ng or ate pwede po bang pahingi ng another spoon or fork kasi nahulog yung sakay. 'Di ba? We make it in a normal tone of voice sila. Ang lakas talaga ng boses nilang dalawa. To the point na napapatingin din yung ibang kumakain. Akala ko nga nung una, ako lang yung, medyo sensitive eh. Pero hindi naman pala. Also, if you have watched or if you're fond of watching classic movies, Scarlett O'Hara, the character from Gone with the Wind, please watch that. That's a very good movie to watch. It's based on a novel, pero meron siyang movie adaptation. It's a classic movie, one of my favorite movies. She is a representation of a histrionic personality. So, panoorin niyo siya para lang makita niyo paano or how do people with this disorder act. Okay. So, in terms of the cause and of course the treatment, there is a lack of research for this disorder, thus the etiology is unknown. However, it is seen to often co-occur with antisocial personality disorder that some says that it might be the feminine variant of the antisocial traits. However, I don't believe that because of the fact na more on sa irresponsible actions kasi si antisocial. Whereas with histrionic kasi it's more on getting the attention, parang agaw pansin or KSP kulang sa pansin siya. Na parang wala naman ako masyadong makita na criminal or actions that might lead to criminality with this one. Okay. Now, for treatment option, it is focused more on attention seeking and long-term negative consequences of this type of behavior. And then, the target may also include problematic interpersonal behaviors. So, like for example, dahil nga very sila, theatrical and they want the attention to be focused on them, the communication would be difficult with these people. So, pwedeng maraming mapikon sa kanila kasi nga, parang ikaw na lang ba lagi bida, 'di ba? Dahil din wala ngang research masyado about these cases, there is very little evidence that shows that treatment is effective for this disorder. Okay, now moving on to the narcissistic personality disorder. So, this one is one that's quite prevalent. Okay, so what are the clinical features of this disorder? So, this is the exaggerated and unreasonable sense of self-importance. So, medyo, kung, we'll put it simply, ito yung medyo mayabang at saka medyo mataas ang tingin sa sarili. They are also preoccupied with receiving attention, but attention that is good, wherein yun nga sila yung magaling, sila yung matalino, 'di ba? Lahat ng mga superlatives sila. And aside from that, they lack sensitivity and compassion for other people, and they are very sensitive to criticism and as well as envious and arrogant. So the name is from the Greek god, not Greek god, from the story of Narcissus. Remember Narcissus died because he was so in love with himself. So, talk about narcissism, di ba? Um, parang he thought that he was the most perfect and dahil gusto niya ngang makita and closer inspection yung reflection niya sa sa water, he he went through to the water, hindi siya marunong lumangoy, ayan, nalunod siya, kaya namatay siya. So, that is the story of Narcissus, from where the term narcissistic came from. And we also use this term, yun, pag medyo mayabang, mahangin yung kausap natin, di ba? Parang medyo narcissistic ka dun sa part na yun, di ba? Ganun yun natin siya ginagamit. Pero kasi ito, disorder siya in the sense na, ayun, hindi niya na makita na there are other people who might be better than him or her, di ba? And then everything should be about them. Uh, there, there, I also had cases like this sa annulment. Ano ba yung isang memorable na case ko? Teka lang, nagre-recall ako ng mga cases. Ito, sabi sa akin nung wife niya, sobrang yabang nga daw ng asawa niya. To the point daw na, pag speaker yung asawa niya, nagde-derail na tungkol sa doon sa topic na dapat ipinapaseminar niya. Kasi nga, parang laging yung asawa niya is, kasi ako ganto, parang di naman sila nagmamayabang, ako kasi ganto, ganto, ganto. Ako nga ganto. Parang, kumbaga wala na sa topic. Let's say, for example, ang topic natin ay personality disorder. Tapos, sasabihin niya, yung narcissistic personality disorder, mga gantong tao yan, mga mayayabang. Ako nga, hindi naman ako ganun kayabang eh. Humble lang kasi ako kasi naniniwala ko na parang everything should be about him or her. So, ganung level daw yung narcissism ng asawa niya. To the point daw na pag nag-aaway sila, the husband is always pointing to her na, siya lang yung magaling, siya lang yung nagbibigay ng sustenance sa family even though the wife is also working. And sabi nga nung wife is, hindi naman sa nakikipagkompetensya ko, pero alam ko sa sarili ko yung worth ko. Pero pag kausap ko siya, parang yung tinapos ko, yung college degree niya daw, yung kanyang master's degree, it doesn't mean anything for the husband. So, yun yung problema. And then, even when she was doing her master's studies, hindi, parang wala rin daw siyang support from the husband kasi sabi sa kanya, nung husband niya, magmamasteral ka pa, ang baba lang naman ng sweldo dun sa work mo. Para saan ka pa magmasters, diba? Parang ganon ang sa kanya. So, lack of compassion and sensitivity. Diba? And then, ayun nga daw, pag pino-point out niya din yung mali nung asawa niya, ayun, doon na daw sila nag-aaway. Pero, pag vice versa, yung ipo-point out nung asawa niya yung mali niya, grabe daw makapag-point out. And then, pag itatry niya daw i-defend yung sarili niya, parang, hindi siya binibigyan ng chance ng asawa niyang i-defend yung sarili niya. So, yan. So, imagine living with a person like that. Na everything should be about him or her. To the point then, if I remember correctly, the story kasi sobrang petty talaga. Nung first time niyang nagluto para sa kanilang mag-asawa, sabi sa kanya nung asawa niya, yan lang nga kaya mong lutuin. Ako nga kaya akong magkaldereta ng nakapikat. Parang, sa kanya, parang she thought it was a joke. But it turns out that the husband was quite serious. And then, when she would tell him na, sige, magluto ka nga kasi total, lagi mo naman pinagmamayabang na na marunong ka magluto or mas magaling ka magluto kaysa sa akin. Ayun, sasabihin sa kanya, ayan, sensitivity to criticism. Sasabihin sa kanya, di ba trabaho mo magluto? Ikaw yung babae dito, right? Di ba? So, I'm sure a lot of you are, especially mga feminists dyan, nanggigigil dito sa kinukwento ko. But those were some of the cases that I've handled. There are some people as well that I've worked with who are quite narcissistic na nami-meet yung nami-meet yung criteria for the narcissistic or the NPD. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that are said to be the cause of disorder is the failure to learn empathy as a child. So again, remember that during the childhood stage or period, that is the fundamental stages wherein the basic things like socialization, uh, showing this reaction, etc., etc., are taught to us by our parents or significant adults in our life. So I've also read as well that people with narcissism tend to have low maternal empathy. So, kaya hindi rin sila nag-learn ng empathy dahil nga hindi sila nabigyan masyado ng empathy ng nanay nila. So, kaya, in a way, tama si Freud or tama din yung mga terms natin, yung mga joke natin before na, kasi di yan love ng mama niya. May pinagkukunan tayo or may basis yung ganong terminology or pun na ginagamit natin. Now, for the sociological view, ayan, the product of the me generation. Unfortunately, the Z generation have shown this, especially with the things that they are quite offended by. Medyo, ang dami niya kasi to the point na it's ridiculous na. Like, for example, I've watched one reel sa Facebook. I don't watch TikTok. I don't want to go to that wormhole. Baka ma-addict ako. Pero yung mga nakikita kong mga Facebook reels na galing ng TikTok, sociologist siya and yan, sinasabi niya yung mga napapansin niya sa mga generation, particularly with the Z generation, na ang nakita niya nga, it's good thing that may awareness yung generation na to. However, the bad thing is that they are offended even though the group that they are offended in behalf of are not offended. Alam mo yun, yung parang, I'm offended in behalf of this group. Parang ganun sila. Na parang, let's say, for example, may nang bash sa akin. So, sabihin nyo, I'm offended in behalf of Ma'am Karen. Sa akin naman, bahala na sila bash. Problema na nila yun, hindi ko yung problema. To the point that they would, of course, call out, ito na yung cancel culture, which is not really helpful. Kasi nga, it's not really correcting anything, but it's reinforcing the mob culture in a sense. Na parang, sige, dahil ginawa niya to, pagkaisahan natin siya. Huwag natin siyang pansinin. So, and in turn, that kind of mentality can cause a deeper consequence to the person na inaus mo sa group. So, ano ba yung movie yon? Hindi movie. Music video. One of Eminem's earlier works na nagsuot siya ng Mexican costume. And this was in the late 90s something or early 2000 na hindi pa uso ang cancel culture. And then wala pang masyadong awareness on cultural appropriation as terms na very offensive. Those things were not being talked about yet. So, ang sabi nga ng sociologist is that trinay niyang kausapin yung mga Mexican, those from the Mexican, of Mexican descent rather, and then she asked them, were you offended with Eminem appropriating your culture? Most of them said hindi kasi um, it was one of the ways how Eminem do his parang signature niya yan when he makes a music video. And then yung mga sumagot lang ng yes, yun yung mga medyo bata-bata ang age, and yun yung nasa Gen Z nga. So, ayan. Which is very alarming if we would continue, or if the generation, the Z generation would continue in that kind of behavior. This may be the outcome. So I think the some of the behaviors have to be reined back or controlled or regulated, kasi sometimes it's too much na ayun nga, they have this tendency na kalkalin pa yung past and still be offended by it, and then maghahanap sila na magka-cancel dun sa isang tao na nag-cause ng offense, air quotes, dun sa word na offense. And then, when you think about it, wala ka naman magagawa dun, kasi unang-una, it's in the past, and some of those things in the past were still acceptable. So, they are currently, or they are conveniently forgetting that society is evolving as well. So, yun. With the treatment options, it should focus on the grandiosity, the idea na siya lang yung magaling. Kasi nga, mayroon silang delusions of grandeur. They are beautiful, they are very intelligent, they are, again, lahat ng superlatives nasa kanila na. And then, of course, the lack of empathy will be the focus of the treatment, kasi nga they don't consider other people as kumbaga equal to them, kasi nga sila lang ang pinagpala sa lahat ng creation ni God. And then they have this unrealistic thinking. Also emphasize realistic goals and coping skills for dealing with criticism. Kasi nga, that is one of the things that they find very difficult to deal with. And with that one, the problem is that since they believe that they are they are great, parang sumunod na sila kay God, mababa yung evidence for that treatment is effective, dahil nga syempre hindi rin masyado pumupunta sa therapies, or kung pumunta man, the therapy would not work, kasi nga they feel na I shouldn't be here kasi I don't have a problem, people around me have a problem. So yan. Okay. Teka lang, balik tayo dito. Para mas makarelate kayo, a good character for this one is done by content creator, yung sino ba to? Glam Kitchen. Welcome to the Glam Kitchen. 'Di ba? I forgot yung pangalan niya. Alam ko, nalilimutan na pangalan. Teka lang. Hanapin ko. Shia Dani. Okay, si Shia Dani yung Welcome to the Glam Kitchen. Yan. I'm not sure if you're watching it. Okay. But the character that she made is
Today we're gonna make banana chocolate chip muffins. What do you think about that? I don't care. That's what you're gonna eat today. You're gonna need dying bananas like this. We're not looking for a banana with a headache or a banana with high pressure. We're looking for.
ayan. So, basically, you just heard a snippet of what she's saying dun sa mga content na ginawa niya. But the the portrayal is quite funny. But if you look at it deeply, ayan, makikita mo na may grandiosity doon. And then, merong actually, parang it's a mix between histrionic and narcissistic. Tingnan yung mabuti and tell me which is which. And then, okay, so moving on with the avoidant personality disorder. So this is, we're now at cluster C disorder. So the first one is the avoidant. And with the avoidant, they are very sensitive to the opinions of others. They are highly avoidant of most interpersonal relationship. They are interpersonally anxious and fearful of rejection, and they have low self-esteem. So, kung makikita nyo, parang, ma'am, di ba kanina yun din yung sa narcissistic? The difference is that they are sensitive to the opinions of others, not criticisms per se. Kahit sasabihin lang na parang, oy, parang may nagbago sa'yo, ganun lang ka-vague, pero sa kanila, they would take it already as parang, teka lang, should I be anxious about that remark? Whereas si narcissistic kasi, more on sa criticism siya. Doon siya magre-react na parang, kuwari, sasabihin mo, teka lang, parang may mali doon sa ginawa mo. Sabi niya, anong mali? Hindi ako nagkakamali. So, ganun kagad yung reaction niya. That's the difference between the two. And then with these types of personality, they avoid interpersonal relationship kasi nga they tend to think that they would be rejected. So, bago pa sila ma-reject, mag-a-avoid na ako. And then they pretty much have low self-esteem. Okay. Now, the causes, there is some link to schizophrenia for this disorder, although it's not seen to be highly comorbid with schizophrenia. Ang nakikita lang nila is that mas mataas yung occurrence niya sa mga taong may relatives na may schizophrenia. And then aside from that, early experience of rejections as a child, kung wari, 'di ba, ni-reject ng parents, ni-reject ng peers, so yung mga ganon. Also contributing might be childhood experience of neglect, isolation, rejection, and conflict with others. So, katulad nga sinasabi ko, ayun, di siya masyado nakaka-get along dun sa peers niya, or di siya masyadong hindi nurturing yung parental situation niya or yung environment niya growing up. Okay. Now, the treatment for this one is quite similar for social phobia. So, parang may assertiveness training din. Yun lang, they would focus on the social skills as well as helping the client to enter in anxiety-provoking situation. Like, for example, pasasalihan siya sa parties, like and then sasabihin sa kanya, you have to talk with 5 people in the party. So that's anxiety provoking kasi nga, again, with avoidant personality disorder, they avoid social interactions kasi nga they already have this idea na I will be rejected, so therefore I should avoid it bago pa ako ma-reject. Okay. And it's very important that the therapist would establish good relationship with the client. Otherwise, it would be difficult to do the treatment for this one. Kasi nga, kung naramdaman niya na may rejection si therapist sa kanya, then definitely the client would shut off. Okay. Next up is the dependent personality disorder. Now, the dependent personality disorder is reliance on others to make a major and minor life decisions. They also have unreasonable fear of abandonment, and then they are clingy and submissive in interpersonal relationship. Now, kung makikita nyo, this is quite similar with the borderline personality disorder. However, the difference between the two of them is that with borderline, they don't like to be left behind kasi remember they have problems with their self-esteem as well as their identity. They feel that the relationship is the one that's contributing to their identity or their self-esteem. Ito naman, kaya sila my fear of abandonment, it's because they feel that they will not live dahil nga yung alone or by themselves, na they will not be able to make decisions by themselves if they are left behind or if they are left on their own. So this is why they are quite clingy ayan, they tend to just submit to others, especially those whom they perceive to be dominant in the relationship. Um, dahil, yun, ganun ang personality nila. Now, I had some cases like this na uh, lalaki yung diniagnose ko nito. So, parang may isang point doon na nagka-dengue yung anak nila. So, sabi nung wife, dalhin na natin siya sa ospital, yung anak nga. Sabi nung asawa niya sa kanya, hindi, antayin muna natin sila mama na sabihin na dalhin na siya sa ospital. 'Di ba? So, very frustrating if you're the wife. Kasi parang, anak ko to eh. Bakit ko pa antayin yung nanay mo na magdesisyon kung dadalhin natin sa ospital o hindi yung bata? So, that's major life decision. Tapos, sabi nga sa akin nung client, parang, dapat nakita ko na, una pa lang. Kasi ang sabi daw sa kanya nung asawa niya, nung nililigawan siya, parang, tinanong ko pa nga yung nanay ko kung okay kang ligawan. That's also a life decision, 'di ba? Pati ba naman ba liligawan, matatanong mo pa sa nanay mo, 'di ba? Parang kulang na lang tanungin mo yung nanay mo na, ano ba, makipag-sex na ba ako sa kanya or hindi? Ano ba, bubuntisin ko ba siya or hindi? And the wife got frustrated kasi even the decision on where their kid would attend school, ayan, tinanong pa ng asawa niya sa nanay niya. So, sabi ko, if that's the case, why did you let, sabi niya, hindi naman nanalo lagi yung nanay niya sa akin, kaya nga parang may conflict din sila ng nanay niya, nung mother-in-law niya, kasi nga parang ang sa kanya, this is my family, this is my life, let me have or let me decide on these things. And then, yun nga din yung pinapoint out niya daw sa asawa niya na parang, nag-asawa ka na eh, bakit kailangan mo pang i-involve dito yung nanay mo with every little thing that you do? Yan. So, kaya, diniagnose ko yung lalaki with dependent personality disorder. And then, ayun, isa pa rin pala sa reason ko kung bakit ko siya diniagnose with this one. The guy keeps on asking the wife, na kumari, pag nagkaroon sila ng disagreement ng mother-in-law niya, sasabihin daw sa kanya na asawa niya na, mag-sorry ka na kahit si mama yung mali, mag-sorry ka na kasi hindi natin kaya na kasi, may financial support din daw na binibigay sa kanila yung mother-in-law niya. But it's not too much as according to the wife. However, her husband at that time was felt that it was a lot, na parang hindi dapat mawala yung financial support na yun ng nanay niya as well. So, ayan. Kaya eventually she got fed up and decided to file an annulment. Okay. Now, the causes of this disorder. Um, hindi rin siya well researched actually. Especially for a country like US na they put a lot of premium on independence, autonomy and independence, 'di ba? But here in the Philippines, I don't think we will lack research. It just so happens na hindi siya pinag-aaralan masyado kasi marami tayong ganyan. Ang concept natin dyan ay mama's boy. So, yun nga rin yung sabi ng kliyente ko. Ano siya? Mama boy siya or mama's boy siya. So, ayan. It's linked to early disruptions in learning independence. So, ito yung mga yung may mga helicopter mom or helicopter parents na mga magulang. Kuwari, nadapa lang ng konti yung anak. Kalaban, anak, nadapa ka. Akala mo namatay na yung anak. Um, so basically not letting the child learn autonomy, explore things on their own. So treatment option, unfortunately, since wala sila masyadong studies about it in US, the research on efficacy of treatment is also lacking as well. However, therapy can be done as it can it can be a good leverage na wala silang independence or they don't understand independence kasi nga if the therapist would ask them or mandate them na you need to come, you need to go kasi you need this, ayan, pupunta naman sila. Yun nga lang, basically it's parang you are using one of their symptoms to for them to get help, which is ironic in a sense. Okay, the last in the cluster C disorder, the obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, with this disorder, there is an excessive and rigid fixation on doing things the right way. People with this disorder are highly perfectionist, orderly, and emotionally shallow. They are also unwilling to delegate tasks because others will do them wrong. They have difficulty with spontaneity or yung parang lakad na walang plano, 'di ba? And often have interpersonal problems. Obsessions and compulsions are very rare for this type of disorder. So this is why it's not OCD but this is OCPD. Kasi nga, a good example for this will definitely be Sheldon. Kasi 'di ba, si Sheldon ayaw niya ng like for example, pagkakatok, he's very fixated on knocking 3 times. He will not open the door if you did not knock 3 times. And then he is seen also to be very perfectionist and orderly. And he's emotionally shallow. He cannot, when you see the show, there are some things that he said that are quite hurtful to some of his friends, but he didn't really care. Kasi nga, yun yung nakita niya. Like for example, yung naghahanap si Raj ng accountant, then siya yung parang hindi naman siya nag-volunteer pero kinuha ni Raj yung services niya as accountant. And then parang 'di ba si Raj ay may mababa self-esteem ni Raj. Um I think Raj can fit the ano ba si Raj? Pwedeng nasa histrionic siya, pero feeling ko si din nasa histrionic eh. Sino ba to? Yung Jewish na barkada nila. Si Leonard, yun eh, may anxiety yun. Um, I forgot. Nawala yung pangalan. Anyway, so going back doon sa sinasabi ko, ayun, minsan may sinasabi siyang things kay Raj na masakit, but he doesn't really show or he doesn't really care na masakit yung sinabi niya. Even telling the other friend, the Jewish friend na, you might make it to my circle of friends, even though that person had already considered him as a friend, 'di ba? And then there was also some point na parang gumawa sila ng project tatlo, pero hindi dinelegate ni Sheldon yung task kasi nga he feels that he would do it better than the other two, than Leonard and the other friend. And then he doesn't like when his schedules are disrupted. 'Di ba nung nagde-date sila ni Amy, and even their sex is scheduled. So that's difficulty with spontaneity. Um Although my obsession siya doon, he is very obsessed with trains. But remember, um sabi niya rare, and hindi siya imposible. Rare lang siya. Pero sa kanya kasi, meron rin siyang OCD. He likes order and very, yeah, and push to order things in order to be able to do well. Okay. So again, OCPD is a pervasive need to do things the certain way but not ritualized way. Okay, unlike with OCD. So that's why OCPD and OCD are not the same. So this is driven more by rigidity than anxiety, as we have seen. What Sheldon had done. He's a very rigid character. He doesn't like to adapt to the situation. He doesn't like to compromise to other people. Okay. Now, the cause of this disorder is not well known, although they have seen that there might be a moderate genetic contribution. Another thing about this one is that nakikita din nila pag malaki yung ano ba sabi ni Freud? Retentive personality can be also um, or can also explain this, pero medyo of course mababa ang researchability ng psychoanalytic uh, teka lang, psychoanalytic um, theories, no? So this might have to be looked in further. Now, for the treatment, it includes cognitive reappraisal techniques to reframe compulsive thoughts, such as yun nga, they will make a mistake, so I might as well do it by myself, etc., etc. It also targets rumination, na I have to redo it until it's perfect. Procrastination, like I would not do it until I feel that I can do it perfectly. And then feelings of inadequacy, especially when they fail to reach their expectation, tumatas ang nila sense of inadequacy. Okay, so summarizing all of the PD, these are again long-standing patterns of behavior, hence the term personality disorder, and it begins in early development. Usually, it is detected during the young adulthood ages, and it runs a chronic course. Okay, and then there is a disagreement over how to categorize the personality disorder. Should you use categorical or dimensional, or the combination of both? In my case, I use the combination of the two. Um, and then for most of the disorders, as you have seen or noticed, little is known about the causes and even the treatment. Kasi nga, again, how can you treat something that you don't really know or understand what causes it to happen? So that's it for the personality disorders. Please prepare for the post test, and I'll see you all guys next week. Bye guys.